Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 94, the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, and anything and everything that's got anything to do with any of that. Now, we're going to go straight in with some interesting stuff. But first of all, though, we've had a subscriber comment that I want to quickly mention. So Tobias Jones has commented on one of our videos, and what he said is that he really loves the interviews, but he really liked seeing us in action a few episodes ago when we were doing the property shoot.
I do believe we were sat down in the car for most of that, though.
That's right, yeah. And then we did some behind the scenes on the actual shoot. So Tobias, that is something that we're planning on expanding this year. That's our plan for 2022, is to actually create more behind the scenes content for all of you. You know, if you're interested in that sort of thing, let us know. If you enjoy that. So that's really the plan. So there's a number of things coming up this year that should be of interest, hopefully.
Absolutely. And we may even do a little BTS for the follow-up to that same job we were on.
Yes, correct.
In the episode that he was talking about there.
Yeah. So more to come. With that, keep your eyes peeled and keep listening because, that is definitely happening. There's another thing I want to talk about, because I got some questions about the Flambeaned Technique that was mentioned in the same episode.
It's not a real word.
It's actually a real word. So Flambient is really a blend of an ambient shot with a flash shot. Hence Flambient.
You made it up.
It's an actual thing. And I'll just explain briefly how that works and why you would want to do that. So the thing about, in particular...
is it not just an ambient shot done with a bit of pizzazz?
No, it addresses one basic problem. For anybody who's ever taken, photos of an interior of a building, like whether it's in your apartment or in a house or whatever, the problem that you always have is that when you expose for the interior of the room, your windows are going to be blown out. And when you expose for the windows, the interior is going to appear dark. So the problem that we have is that our eyes have a much wider dynamic range compared to cameras. And although dynamic range, is increasing in cameras, it has been ever since the invention of cameras, I guess, in the first place. But still, cameras really, in general, are by no means capable of really, depicting that wide dynamic range between the lit interior and then the very bright exterior. So the thing is, when you're creating imagery of an interior of a room, for instance, then you need to balance these two elements. And so as a result, you really need to combine an exterior exposure, so a window shot, and I'll explain how that's done in a minute, and an interior shot. And so the way to do that really is to combine really three images. So the Flambeaned technique really involves actually three images. So we've got a regular ambient shot where you expose for the interior of the room and you take a picture. And what it does is it gives you some color, and it gives you the interior of the room as it may appear. And the problem, though, is that your shadows can often appear really very dark. Mm-hmm. And so what you do is you take a flash shot, which is your second image, which basically means you use a flash and you essentially bounce it off of the ceiling, so you get a really wide spread and relatively soft shadows. And you expose for that flash shot. And then the third shot is where you essentially expose for the window, right? And then you fire a flash at the window whilst your exposure is set for the exterior. And what that does is it basically gives you well-exposed windows and slightly overexposed windows around, like window frames. And the reason why I do that is because actually when you blend it all together in Photoshop later on, it makes it much easier to blend those images.
So at what point would you use the ambient shot versus the interior flash shot?
Okay, good. Excellent question, actually.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, so what you really do is, what you really want is you want the overall exposure of the flash shot with the color of the ambient shot. And so what you do is you blend these two shots in Photoshop. So for example, so what you actually do is, I'll just explain it very quickly. If anybody is interested in us creating an actual tutorial, a Photoshop tutorial, then please let us know. I'll gladly do that. But in a nutshell, you've got these three layers. You've got the ambient layer, you've got the flash layer, and you've got the window layer. So the first thing you want to do is, take the ambient layer and basically change that to a luminosity blending mode. And then you want to basically dial that in at about 50% opacity. So what that does is it means you're basing it on the original flash shot, but then you bring in the color and the sort of contrast from the ambient shot, which works really well. It basically just means, you get the best of the ambient and the best of the flash shot, which basically means you get a little bit more light in the shadows and stuff like that. And it gives you a really balanced shot. So typically what I tend to do is I tend to bring that ambient shot in at about 40-50% opacity, somewhere around. I just have to kind of gauge that a little bit and see what looks good. And then for the window shot, you essentially change that to darken mode. You put it on the top, and you then create a black mask, and then you just simply brush in the window area. And typically, if you've done it right, you won't have any major spill on the window frame. So it's literally you're just bringing in the exterior, and it works.
So why does the overexposed window frames, if you like, why does that work? Because with them being overexposed.
Okay, and that is because you've set that layer to darker mode, and what that actually does is it only brings in anything that's darker than what is in the underlying layer. So essentially, by doing that, by overexposing the window frame in a sense, you're preventing that from being revealed in that layer, and so you immediately have a much better blend. I mean, if for whatever reason that didn't work out, and sometimes it doesn't, it depends on the color of the window frame sometimes, and, on a number of other aspects. What we found very often with properties is depending on the angle of the windows and everything else, sometimes it's actually difficult to make the strobe not show in the reflection of the window. And so sometimes you then have to come in relatively low, right? And then, but you can still mask the window frame out. I mean, still do it. It's easily done, but it's just more work. So by using that little trick, using darken mode, it just means the whole thing is quicker.
And just so everybody's clear, when you're saying overexpose those window frames, do you mean just higher, more exposed than the window itself, or blown out?
It can be blown out. It doesn't really matter. Okay. I mean, to be honest, as long as you get a really good exposure of the exterior, and then you're fine. And you have you want to try and avoid getting a reflection of the strobe in the window. Obviously, if you can avoid that, then that's. Sometimes you can fix things afterwards, but by and large, you want to try and avoid that, and you can avoid that by changing the angle of the flash, for example, or sometimes we found it makes it much easier when you bring the flash in low. Very often, that particularly with the kind of windows that we were shooting at, did work quite well.
Yeah,
but sometimes it's unavoidable, and then you just have to Photoshop your way out of it.
And the other thing that we had to do quite a lot is just be conscious of what's in front of those windows as well, right?
Yes.
To make sure that, frankly, that post is as easy as it can be. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with all of that is, it's all well and good when you're editing one photo, like then you can spend time on it. But when you're, when you've got hundreds of shots that need to go through post production, then all these things matter, because if you save, a minute on one image, for example, that's all of a sudden like 2 hours that you saved across the whole, the whole job sort of thing. So that all that stuff is important. There's another technique that's often talked about when it comes to especially interior property photography and exteriors, I guess, and that's the HDR technique. It's a high dynamic range. Basically, that's a different technique. It works differently, and it's that was all the rage a few years ago. On this particular job, actually, it was an interesting thing because I thought it'd be a good idea to run a comparison. And so I actually shot both for virtually almost every shot. And and then because I wanted to compare in post, what would work better for my, I don't know, for my stylistic eye, basically, And I found that virtually whenever there's a window in the shot, the HDR technique didn't work for me at all.
Interesting.
And for two reasons. One is actually the exposure on the window wasn't great. It's virtually almost always overexposed still. And secondly, especially when it's a sunny day, and secondly, I didn't like the way that the light renders, because the difference between the color temperature on the interior and the color temperature of the light coming in through the window, there's way too much of a difference there. And that really had an impact. And I just didn't like the way these images were coming together. But when I compared the two shots, one using HDR and one using the Flambeaned technique, the Flambeaned technique every single time won by a country mile.
Would you say that had you only have done HDR that day or those days, that actually it still would have been perfectly acceptable and usable?
No, I don't think so. I mean, some shots are really, I looked at them and I'm like, I wouldn't want to deliver that. That's the truth of it. The whole thing changes so when there are no windows in the frame. So some of the offices, for instance, that we shot that really didn't have any natural lights and no windows, the HDR worked perfectly fine. Absolutely no problem. So, and of course, again, from a post-production point of view, HDR is actually quicker than using the Flambeant technique.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and again, just as a super quick explanation, HDR basically works by, it's essentially a bracketing technique where you take a shot at its actual exposure, and then you take a shot, a stop under and a stop over, or you could take 5 shots, for instance, 2 stops under, 1 stop under, actual exposure, 1 stop over, and 2 stops over, or you can set that. In your camera, whichever you want, and then you combine those images in post. And Lightroom, as well as Photoshop, have a function, a photo merge function that merges the HDRs automatically. It works really well as far as that's concerned, but it's a particular look, and it's one of these hyper real looks that was really kind of all the rage, some time ago. But I think we've sort of moved away from that. And what I would say is the Flambeant technique, really, the results look much more natural, much more natural and more pleasing, they're just as detailed as HDR, but they actually look real. Yeah. Whilst HDR always looks a bit sort of, you see, it's something you can detect immediately when you see an HDR image. So
it's a good move doing both on the day then. It's nice to be able to compare from exactly the same starting point.
Absolutely, yeah. And, across all sorts of different scenarios, that was the other thing, we had, because we shot all sorts of different rooms in different buildings, different colored walls, different scenarios with lots of windows, some windows, one window, no windows. Some of them were sort of kitchen areas that had different colors and different lighting. So there's a whole range of different scenarios, and you're being able to actually look at the images in post and compare both those techniques has been really, really useful.
That was interesting, wasn't it? You can't underestimate at all how dark an office actually is everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost without exception. Yeah. It's really, really dark. It's just, it goes back to your eyes again. Your ability to just adjust and to be there is so far, far superior than the camera. And you look and go, my God, what is that? The color of lights, shocking. And actually, you just mentioned the walls there, and I had a lot of trouble with some of the wall colors in there, and it took a lot of manipulation of the light to try and get it in a way that just made the light even, rather than getting that weird color cast coming through into the room.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very strange, particularly with some of those grey walls and real pain.
There was a couple of really interesting shots as well. There was one particular scenario where we simulated sunlight in the reception area. And
I haven't seen that yet. Did that?
I think it came out,
Did it pay off?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that particular shot, it was an area, it was like a reception area. There's a couch and there's some seating. And it looked like a nice area with some artwork on the wall. And when we first arrived, there was some sun coming straight through that window, and it really cast like really nice sunbeams across the floor and everything. And I kind of thought, oh man, that'd be great to photograph that like that. But then, of course, once we were ready and we got back, all of that had changed. So the sun had moved on to a different place, and our home planet had revolved and moved around.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In a way that didn't necessarily, we didn't end up with great light there. So we had to light it, and so I decided to sort of replicate the original situation. So you were outside, and we were firing a flash through the window into that space, just to create an extra frame where we could simulate these light beams, and that actually did pay off in the end. Yeah,
good. Worth doing then.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just goes to show you can kind of make something.
I forgot to tell you, we had a bit of an audience across the road. For that
did you?
One. Yeah. Yeah, that was quite amusing. Yeah, I had no idea what we were doing. Very funny.
So it was you with a boom and a strobe out in the street.
Very odd.
So yeah, but like I said, that paid off. That's good news. So it's an interesting thing, if you're into photographing properties or just want to get acquainted with the Flambeaned technique, then let us know, and we can like I said, I happily put a tutorial together if that's something anybody's interested in. Just let us know.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was quite cool. There's also another thing I learned is we were really careful in using a remote to trigger the shutter, for example, right? Because I know that any micro movement on the camera can basically cause problems later on. And so when you use your finger to press the shutter button, for instance, you're ever so slightly vibrating the camera, and that has an effect. And so we were using a remote for all of the shots that we took, and still in post, you would not believe what the differences still were.
Really?
Yeah. And that's, of course, just the shutter mechanism actually moving the camera ever so slightly.
Yeah.
Because there were no other variables in that.
Yeah. You
and
wouldn't have that trouble these days normally, though, would you?
And yet, when you auto-align those images, and you can see how, once it's aligned, you can see how different.
Few mil off that side, few mil off down there.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So, so that's, and of course that really is something you have to do with any of these techniques. You have to really align your layers once you get them in Photoshop. Again, super easy. There's an auto align function. Does a really good job.
Absolutely.
No problem. So yeah, and then to speed things up even more, I just created some actions for that. That basically now means that with the click of a button, all my layers are ordered correctly, and masks are created, and blend modes are set up, and shebang.
Shazam.
It's all about being efficient.
I learned something new this last week when we were doing that. Since moving to DaVinci has an inbuilt. So let me take one step back. So I always use the X-Rite Video Passport color checker.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you perhaps don't know what one of those are, basically it's a color chart, but done to a very, very high quality, so that the colors are an absolute known quantity, and the saturation of those colors are an absolute known quantity. So if you put that in the space that you're filming in, or taking a photo in, and you take a photo of that, you can adjust your colors and your exposure to a standard, and that can then be consistent across the board. And so I've always done that manually. Okay, so you pick your reds, your cyans, your magentas, and whatnot, and you just adjust until they're in the right position. No problem. Takes time. Takes time. You have, on kind of the flip side of that, you've got the white balance card as well, which again is all good. But in DaVinci, you have an inbuilt color checker, sort of would automate that for you. You just get a little template kind of overlay, you place it on the color chips,
right,
and you hit go. And it just instantly changes all the colors to right where it should be, changes the white balance, all done. fine. I've used something called cinema grade in the past to do that as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've never been able to get it to work in DaVinci. Never. Not once. It always come out like neon red or neon orange. I've never been able to do it. And I just stumbled upon doing it right.
Yeah.
A complete user error. Of course it's user error. It's always user error.
Were you doing that in the car?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And it turns out, so you get the option to put in what your color gamut is, what your, I could go into all that, well, I won't. Anyway, you put what you filmed it in and what you want to get out of it, Rec 7 and 9, for example. And then there's this color temperature there as well. I've kind of always assumed, and this is my fault for not looking it up properly, I've always assumed that you needed to put that color temperature to what you shot it in.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense to do that. Nope. Don't need to do that. Just ignore that.
Yeah.
That's the color temperature you want it to end at.
Yeah.
So and that's 6500 in DaVinci for that as default.
Yeah.
So if you leave it at 65, it should set it all to being in a white balance of what 6500 Kelvin would look like. Yeah. If you change that to 5500, it will look like 5500 and so on and so on. Just leave it alone and just hit go.
Yeah.
And it's done. The difference it made was insane.
Yeah.
It took something that took a few minutes to get it right, to adjust the colors, adjust the saturation, adjust the white balance, to now instant. Now, that's not to say you're going to leave it like that, because you won't.
Yeah.
You're going to go and grade on top of that and correct other things that need correcting. But it gives all of your shots then that correct base to get going with.
Yeah.
And did you notice the huge, I showed you, didn't I, quickly, the huge swing in, I think it was in the blues, or it was the blue. The blues almost looked red, or I forget exactly what it was now. There's a massive swing. And as soon as you did that and you actually used the color checker properly, it just looked natural.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
Yeah.
Completely natural, as it should. And that's what you want your base to start from.
Yeah.
No problems. And away you go. There you go. Don't use the color temperature part of the color checker, auto color checker being in DaVinci Resolve.
For all of you DaVinci users.
Not that any of you have been touching it. Only me, because I'm an idiot.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, color temperature is always it's always an issue, obviously. And generally speaking, of course, you would.
I've actually always found it one of the hardest things to do. Right.
Yeah.
To get your white balance absolutely spot on.
Well, the thing is, like when you're, especially when you're blending an ambient shot with a flash shot, for example, you've got two completely different color temperatures happening. One is basically dictated by the ambient light, and then a flash shot is essentially you've got your flash light color coming into the whole thing, which is typically, I mean, it's going to be around 5,000 to 5,500, somewhere around about that. And what I found actually is to streamline the process and to make it fast and efficient, because that is something. I mean, you could break out the color chart and photograph that with the ambient shot, and then do another one with a flash and blah blah and all the rest of it. You could do that, but it takes absolutely forever. And in the situation that we were in, for example, we had to basically rush through everything. Not that we rushed through everything. It was more like there was a lot to do and we had a day to do it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how little you get done in a day in a way.
Yeah, nothing.
It's incredible.
So
that was incredible. So basically, you had to really, there were a lot of locations to shoot. A lot of different offices and different setups to shoot, and so things had to be streamlined. And so what I found in the end was actually, if I just relied on the auto white balance in the camera, and then just adjusted it in post, so that the flash shot and the ambient shot blend well, that was by far the fastest way of getting a good result. That absolutely worked every time.
See, it's interesting how that can help
absolutely,
when it needs to help.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I had a slight problem with that. Very, very first shot we did, first room that we dealt with on that first day, bit rushed. We're setting up the room. That room took a lot of setting up as well, and dressing and getting it right. And I basically forgot to set a custom white balance in that room. And so it was left on auto from whatever it was on before, because I'm just an idiot.
Yeah.
And if it was just static, actually would have been fine. But because it's video, there's movement.
Moving,
there's the window light. There were the lamp lights going on as well.
Yeah.
I just sit there and watch it change.
Yeah.
I mean, what an idiotic thing to do. So silly. And it's just there and it's going, oh, it's warmer, it's cooler, it's cooler, it's warmer, cooler. Thankfully, it was all done in slow-mo. And actually, I'm going to need a little bit of that. And the short section I'm going to need, it won't change, so I can just set it to that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Had it been a faster moving shot or something that was in real time, I could have run into some problems there. I got lucky. From a photographic point of view, one of the advantages of shooting office spaces is that you practically always have something that's white in the frame somewhere. Like you have either white walls, which we had a lot of, or you have pieces of paper on a desk or something like that. Yeah.
And so that always,
good in a pinch,
in post, gives you a good starting point. And what I found was that depending on what location we were in, once I decided on the overall color temperature for that particular room, for example, literally all of my ambient shots for that room would actually work pretty much on the same white balance. And so that took literally like 5 seconds to figure out. And then, and then you have a number of different options later on if you want to warm things up, especially once you're done with the with the blending in Photoshop and you bring it back into, in my case, back into Lightroom to do some final adjustments in there. You have still room to maneuver basically after that. So and it's tricky to balance white walls off against everything else that's in the room, or white ceilings. We had one particular room where we had a lot of like Victorian wood paneling with white lit domed ceilings. That was probably the hardest thing to balance because the relatively dark orangey kind of wood paneling that was in there.
It was casting all sorts of color, wasn't it?
Well, that's one thing, but it was against the super bright white part of the ceiling. It's just, from a dynamic range point of view, it's very difficult to combine that.
Yeah.
So in these shots, you got to be really careful. Either you're going to have to go in and use filters, to bring down the exposure on the ceiling a little bit, or you crop cleverly so that you don't see too much of the ceiling. That's the other way of getting around that. It's just very difficult to get that to balance right.
Do you always provide those shots in standard crop, like 8x10 for argument's sake?
No, they're all basically
random.
They're custom crop, yeah. And that's got to do with so that actually has to do with some perspective correction that has to happen with architectural shots. Generally, you need to essentially compensate for the curvature of the lens. So
I was sure you were going to say curvature of the Earth.
Well, that too, yeah, that sucks. What are you saying? The Earth is flat.
Oh, of course. Silly me.
What curvature of the Earth?
What's off the end of it? Milk. That's it.
Underneath are a bunch of elephants, I've heard.
It's milk. I'm telling you, it's milk.
Isn't it?
That's what's at the end of the universe.
Isn't there a big wall of... There's an ice wall, isn't it? That's like when you get to the end of the ocean, there's a big wall of ice. Seen it in Game of Thrones, I believe. And then...
there you go.
So it wasn't telly, so it must be true. Anyway, so... what was I saying? What were we talking about? I have no idea.
Overexposed white ceilings, using filters if you need to. Crop. There we go. Crop, Custom crop.
Custom crop. It's like, custom crop. Well, I mean, so you're gonna have to compensate for the curvature of
the Earth.
Yeah. And so
I'll send you down that rabbit hole again.
Basically, in a nutshell, what happens is straight lines very often don't appear very straight, especially if you're using wide or super wide lenses, which, especially when you're shooting interiors, you very often have to do. So, so I was using for 90% of it, probably I was using 14 to 24 millimeter 2.8 lens, which is a beautiful lens. Love it.
Yeah,
but you're very often at the 14 mil end of it. So like, between 14 and 18, maybe something like that.
Your lens with the big dome on the end.
Yes. And it's a beautiful lens, but there is some curvature happening there. And of course, it's in no way anywhere near what you would consider fisheye. It really isn't. But, what happens is in post, you're going to have to rectify that and you're going to have to compensate. So,
do you do that auto or do you manually?
Usually manually. So auto, there are basically four different options you could in theory use in Lightroom, for example.
Yep.
You could either use auto, you could use full, or you could use verticals. The verticals, or you could do manual. I'll talk about that in a second. The most important lines to fix in an architectural shot like that are your verticals.
Yep.
Verticals are absolutely crucial. And what you'll find when you do that, you very often get like really weirdly slanted ceilings and stuff like that. Sometimes that's perfectly cool. Sometimes you need to correct your horizontals as well, which is where the auto or the full functions come in. To be honest, it's actually quicker and easier to do that manually, where you actually set your horizontals and your verticals. And it works really well. And then, by default, you sometimes have to crop because you end up with a sort of distortion that leaves, bits of the image on the top of the bottom white. So you're going to have to crop it anyway. But, what I tend to do with any of these kind of shots is I tend to shoot wider than I need to anyway, because I know I'm going to have to compensate for that. So a lot of the time that's on purpose. And that brings you back to your overall, image size and pixels and whatever. When you shoot architectural photography, especially interiors, if you're shooting, let's say for argument's sake, if you're shooting with a 24 megapixel sensor, your images, because they will have to be cropped to some extent, will never end up being 24 megapixels.
No.
So because there's always some croppage that will have to happen, and you just have to take that into consideration. So are, higher megapixel sensors useful in this respect? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Are they necessary? No. No, okay. Not unless your stuff goes onto a billboard or, or anything like that. If it's entirely for online use or even like brochure print or something like that, you don't really have anything to worry about with that.
I can think of very few scenarios where it would be that crucial for the megapixel count to be high for it.
It's when you shoot really wide and you have to crop in quite a lot. Yeah, you can, that would be cool. I think, in the vast majority of, okay, well, if you have a 50 megapixel, 60 megapixel, or even 100 megapixel sensor, then awesome. Why not? But it's not necessary. So I think if you're thinking about getting into property photography, for example, or real estate photography, as it is called in the States, and you think you only have a 24 megapixel camera, don't worry about it. Absolutely, totally doable. No problemo at all. So, it's actually more about the right sort of lens and the right focal length.
Yeah.
Actually, for those sort of things, especially when you're inside of a room, all of a sudden, the difference between 24 and 14 millimeters is the difference it's like the difference between day and night.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Whilst in just about any other situation, my 24 to 70 workhorse will work absolutely fine for just about every and anything that I shoot, with the exception of some type of portraits. But for interiors, that lens is just most of the time not wide enough.
No.
Yeah, and we're in the UK. Rooms are small over here.
Yeah. You need a 1 millimeter lens to do most of our rooms.
Yeah. So but anyway, so that's that was a thing. There, we talked about the Flambeaned technique. Again, if there's something you want to know more about, then let us know. But yeah, what else is new this week?
Oh, very tired. That's what's new this week. That's not new at all, is it?
No, it's not.
No. Yeah, what is new this week? I don't know, I've been working a lot. It's been really busy.
I've been busy as hell. But do you remember last week we were talking about the fact that you said you were really, really super busy, like busier than you've ever been. And now would be the time for you to actually, where you have a need to work out, but you actually don't get around to it because you're too busy or you have no motivation.
Yeah.
Right. So
I was going to go for a run today.
Well, I did.
But I don't believe you.
I have the proof on my watch.
Go on then. Go on. Let's see it. You just put it on your dog, didn't you?
Oh, it's actually on my phone.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah,
how convenient.
No, because it says it on the phone. Hang on. So I went on a run. I did what I set out to do when I first bought this Apple Watch.
Right, done then. Once finished.
And so
2.98K.
Yeah, so it was an easy run, 20-minute easy run. It was really easy, at a really easy pace. But it was the first time I've gone for a run in since I guess. Oh well, actually, I would say generally a proper run since before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I've done a few like couch to 5K things with my wife, which I don't know. But really, this is a very
where you've been running for 30 seconds. Oh, you need to walk for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But this one was
not knocking that, by the way. Just
no, absolutely, totally super cool. But this was like a 20-minute run, light pace. But I used the Nike Run Club app for that.
Yeah, yes, what I use.
Like a guided run.
Oh, you tried the guided one?
I tried it. Yeah, and actually, I tell you what, it worked really well.
I tried that for the first couple of runs I ever did. But pretty much ever did. Yeah, I struggled with it a little bit.
Well, I tell you where it came in.
He annoyed me.
Well, yeah, I can see that. But where it came in really, really, really useful was, I went, basically, I used to run a lot. And so in my mind, it was like, right, okay, I warm up, blah, blah. And then I sort of kind of thought, I'm going to get straight into the sort of pace that I'm used to, or that I used to be used to say. But of course, I haven't been doing anything for a good, 2 years or something like that, really. And so, I have to slow myself down quite dramatically. Mm-hmm. And what that did, that's exactly what that did. So, the voice in my headphones kept telling me to slow down, take it easy, blah, blah. And actually that kept reminding me to actually slow my pace down and watch my breathing and stuff like that. And it worked really well because at first I thought I don't even know whether I can actually run for 20 minutes.
No, maybe it's hard after that long out or ever.
Exactly. And I thought like, well, maybe I should do, something not too dissimilar to a couch to 5K type of program, where you increase the amounts of running versus the walking intervals, over a number of weeks. And so that was the other option. But I kind of thought, what? I'm gonna go in with an easy run. This is specifically designed for people who want to get back into running, and it's literally you focus on your pace and you literally just take it easy. And I have to say, again, it worked really well. And the interesting thing was, I went through a bit of a pain barrier. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could really feel how my body wasn't used to that amount of stress.
It's an interesting feeling, isn't it? When you get through it.
And I had, I had some pain I had some knee pain a few weeks ago. And actually, what I've learned since then is that's actually a post-COVID syndrome type of thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's called something. It's called
nothing to do with your age.
No, it's called. It's a type of arthritis. It's basically a virus-inflicted type of arthritis. Mm-hmm. Pardon me. And it's one of the sort of post-COVID symptoms. That occur sometime after you've had the infection.
All right. Well, interestingly, that's why I kind of took a break from running. So starting to get into it, it was going well. Yeah. I was starting to reach kind of, and this is going from never running before, just after a few weeks to, I started doing 5Ks then every other day. Yeah. And I was started reaching 6 minutes 50 per K on average.
Okay.
Which is, I don't think I'd ever get past that. Okay. It's just, I'm just not built for that. but I had to stop. I stopped because of my knee.
Yeah.
It was done. It was just kept having issues with it. And I took a week break, started going again, and started feeding it halfway through. I thought, I need to take it easy. Yeah. I'm not going to push it. And then I took a 2-week break, still felt a little bit. Then before you know it, you don't go back.
Yeah.
So you take more than a 2-week break, you aren't starting again.
So just that gives you an example from like this 2016 when I used to run quite a lot. So my average pace was 5:36 on a 5K type of run. My pace yesterday was 6:47, so considerably slower than that.
Yeah.
But for me, that actually felt perfect because it literally felt like everything was moving comfortable.
And now you've got to decide whether you go for run the same distance each time, and see how get that time down, or probably the better option is to run for the same amount of time to see how far you go.
Yeah, I mean,
so you keep getting that continued exercise rather than suddenly doing a 20-minute run to now doing a 15-minute run.
I think the next run on this particular program,
which is I think where I made a mistake.
It's like 22 minutes, so it's like that's 2 minutes to it. I think for now, so from a mindset point of view, what was really interesting was that it takes all that pressure away, to start with, where you kind of think, okay, should I go for pace or should I go for time, or, whatever, or for distance? And it basically just enjoy running. Just enjoy it, and don't think about any of these things.
I'll be back in a minute. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. God. But yeah, so it was, it worked. Like I said, it worked really well. I came back to the car and I was wrecked basically.
Car.
Yeah, I drove down to the aquadrome.
I love the fact that you drove before running. That's great.
Yeah, I drove to the aquadrome.
That's excellent.
Yeah, I mean that's what I did. And because we have some lakes. There's an area of lakes nearby where I live, and I could, in theory, walk there, but it was cold and windy, and I kind of thought, right, I'm just going to drive down there, and then I'm right by the lakes, and I start running around the lakes, and that's what I did. Plus, I also didn't know how I was going to feel after the run, whether I had to basically, pick myself up off the floor or not.
Mm.
So I thought,
I'll be thrown up.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, if I got the car there, then
I mean, I'll tell you what, that very first run I ever did. Yeah. I was close to throwing up. Yeah. But it only took one more run before that had all gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't take long.
Doesn't take long. Yeah, you sort of adjust.
And that's going from total cold start, never having really run before.
Yeah, so you adapt relatively quickly.
Mm. I miss it badly.
Yeah, it's something, I'm putting a little routine together. I mean, the other thing that was really a new experience for me, because I'm a summer runner, right? I hate running in the winter.
Mm.
And I really have very little experience with running in cold temperatures, because traditionally what I used to do was I started running in the spring, throughout the summer, maybe into the fall, and then I would switch to the gym.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then in the gym I'd do other things because I really dislike running on a treadmill. And so the whole aspect of layering, I really had no idea. So I actually brought lots more layers than I needed.
It doesn't matter what temperature it is out there. T-shirt and a thin, I've got like a green, very thin jacket, running type jacket, windbreaker or whatever you'd call it. That's more than enough.
Yeah.
Pair of gloves, done.
Yeah, the gloves thing, that's something I've learned.
Critical.
That's something I've learned. That's definitely going to be an addition when I go for a run tomorrow or something. The glove thing, I didn't see that coming, but I was freezing.
Hat.
Yeah, I had a hat,
Music, no music. Headphones on?
Big old headphones.
Big old hat, of course you do.
Earmuffs.
Such a hipster.
Hey, it keeps your ears warm, what can I say?
yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Shorts or joggers?
Joggers, man.
I can't do it.
Really?
I have some. I bought some, put them on when it was cold out, and within half a K, I was boiling alive.
Oh, really? No, I can't do shorts.
Must get yourself a pair of tights,
The
running tights.
Well, I think my joggers are tight.
We know someone who wears those.
Oh, really?
He does, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you can mention that when you see him next.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I was under strict instructions to avoid those like the plague.
Really?
So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would never fly in my house.
Oh, right. I see. Yeah.
I'd be ridiculed to the end of my days, man.
Maybe you could, I'm assuming you've got a tiny little pair of denim shorts somewhere.
Oh, I
wear them.
Hey, I'm Mr. Denim. I mean, that's that could be in the summer maybe.
Denim shorts.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
do it. Yeah. Do it. So short that you can see the pockets properly. All the way through.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Good look.
Yeah, proper like 70s style.
Good look.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that was good though. I enjoyed it.
And then you go to your wife. It's either this or running tights.
Or spandex. Spandex all the way, my friends. Yeah.
Anyway,
it was kind of funny, isn't it? Like everybody else in my household wears tights.
Yeah.
Like literally living in a house with 3 girls is, and I'm not. Even my wife this morning, she got dressed for work and she goes, "Go, my wardrobe's going a little Robin Hood." And she was like wearing like green tights, and I'm like, "I'd be your Friar Tuck."
Oh God! Oh, that's sickening.
I know, but hey,
Oh, are you going to be all bald? Are you?
I go religious all the way. Sure.
Oh.
Yeah, I shaved the top of my head.
And on that terrible disappointment, let's move on.
Oh, okay. Oh man!
Wow.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I came across a number of interesting things this week. So apparently, right, Meta, was it Meta? Meta, Facebook, basically.
Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. So Meta apparently is threatening to shut down Facebook and Instagram in Europe.
Go for it.
Dun dun dun.
Go for it.
So basically, there's an issue because...
Will we not allow them to have enough data?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's basically what it is. Oh. So Facebook is arguing that, it must be allowed to process data from their European users on their US-based servers. And the EU thinks differently, basically. And it's all about data transfer.
Well, that doesn't include us.
Yeah, and so...
Or does it?
I don't know. No, actually, we're not part of the EU, though.
No, but we'll follow suit with stuff like that, I'd have thought.
I don't know. But anyway, so Facebook stroke Meta. Is it Meta?
Yeah, it is that, yeah. But
so
what were they thinking?
Anyway, so they're basically now putting pressure on it, basically saying, we're going to have to pull the plug on Facebook and Instagram.
They'll never do that.
Can you imagine a world without Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah, I can. It's amazing.
By the way, if you are not following us on Facebook and Instagram, especially on Instagram, then make sure you hit us up, Camera Shake Podcast. There you go. That being said, actually, we're going to announce this in future weeks, but we are thinking of changing our Facebook page to a Facebook group for a variety of reasons. We're going to be announcing that very shortly, and hopefully, if you are on the Meta Facebook platform, join us in the Facebook group, because it's just a practical thing for discussions and stuff like that. So, that could be cool. But we'll let you know once that's happened.
Meta.
I know.
Let them pull out. They'll never do it.
But they won't. No, of course not.
They won't.
Because everybody go to TikTok.
There'll be a million things open up within a day.
Facepalm.
And they do that. They'll never get... Well, no, they probably would get get us back. But anyway.
Yeah. So that's one thing. But the funniest thing I've seen this week was a parrot stealing a GoPro in New Zealand. Did you see that video?
No.
Oh my God.
I haven't been on social in weeks.
Well, this is something that's actually sort of... It was in the news. So basically this family...
I've read the news as well, because it's full of two things right now. COVID still, or... naughty Man United players.
Oh, naughty Boris. I mean, that's basically what
yeah.
Naughty politicians or naughty footballers. That's the other thing. But anyway, so this family in New Zealand is out on holiday in this national park called Fiordland National Park, and so they're setting up this GoPro to film themselves, and in the meanwhile, a parrot comes along and nicks the camera whilst it is recording, grabs it, flies away, flies across some countryside and some trees and whatever, and then lands, and then decides to pick the whole thing apart and starts munching it. Okay?
Right.
And the angle, I mean, is amazing actually, because as the parrot grabs the GoPro and takes off and then starts flying, it's the perfect camera angle where you see the parrot's underbelly and you see the countryside underneath, and it's just a beautiful flight video, and it's just super funny when you watch the parrot then go at the GoPro, and then eventually you can see him actually he manages to pick up or to pick off some of the outer housing of the camera, right? But to tip it off, then the son of the family then finds the camera.
How?
Well, because they were following the bird, and then by sheer luck, basically he finds the camera, and you can see him coming in the frame at the end, as he finds the camera. It's a super cute video. It's just so funny to see the parrot, because you can see the parrot like checking out the camera at the beginning, and then he sort of hobbles closer and then grabs it and flies off. So yeah, great thing.
Well, he's an action camera.
I know, yeah. Well, that's a super action. That's a perfect bird's eye view. So yeah,
not bad.
Hilarious.
Like that. Very good.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I thought that's a very, very hilariously funny story.
I've seen a couple of cat videos lately. That's it.
You're still on the cat videos.
That's it. That's all I got. YouTube 1994. Wait, was it around then?
YouTube wasn't around in 1994, sure.
2004 then. Yeah.
Hey, here's a question. Okay, so somebody asked me this. I had a meeting with somebody the other day, and so somebody asked me, they were thinking about producing videos for their business and everything. But for some reason, they had it in their mind that they might want to place those videos on Vimeo rather than on YouTube.
Why?
Exactly. That's exactly my question. So, so I thought I'm going to ask you that. Why? What would be a reason to favor Vimeo over YouTube?
You can password protect them,
right?
And only people with a password can view them, even if you got the link. Whereas YouTube, you can't do that. You have an unlisted video or private video, but if you've got the link.
But if you wanted a video to like sit on your website, for example, and if you wanted to reach an audience with it, you didn't want to kind of keep it behind some kind of wall or something, then what would be?
I don't know if they have other upload options, different formats that you can upload in. I don't see why that would be relevant. I don't have an answer to that. I don't look at Vimeo because the last time I did look at it, I just thought, well, this is pointless.
Well, I tell you what, the last time I looked at Vimeo...
There must be a reason.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I looked at Vimeo, I saw either like videos by filmmakers, and I came across some Peter McKinnon videos.
Really?
Yeah. That's like before his sort of YouTube career, when he was making video, when he was still a magician sort of thing.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically... That's all I came across.
That's interesting. I don't know. I'll have to look into that again. I've not looked at Vimeo in so long. I don't know if it streams better to your site or anything. I don't know.
No idea.
There's got to be a reason.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you have any experience with Vimeo, then please let us know.
Yeah,
or not necessarily experience, but if you have any thoughts on Vimeo, then let us know. Or if you in fact work for Vimeo as you're watching this, please enlighten us. Because we actually really want to know. Yeah. Well, there's something new coming out in the next few weeks, because the Micro Four Thirds Brigade has announced a couple of new cameras. And by Micro Four Thirds, I've basically been Panasonic and Digital,
yes,
formerly known as Olympus.
Yeah.
So, I still don't know whether it's Digital or OM Digital, but we must get the two Clairs on at some point.
It's probably OM, but I like
Yeah. So anyway, Panasonic and Olympus have both announced new cameras they will be announcing new cameras within the next few weeks. Could be quite interesting. One of the things that both of those share, by the way, in case you didn't know this, is that they share the same mount.
Yeah.
So you can, interchange lenses or whatever. But Panasonic, I mean, obviously the difference between Panasonic and Olympus, just, for mutual coherence, has always been that Panasonic have really focused on the video side of things, more with the GH5 and the GH5S, and now with the GH6. So the GH6 was supposed to. Well, it was announced a year ago. It was supposed to be released before the end of the year, 2021, and now it's finally coming out on February the 22nd, apparently, or it will be announced on February the 22nd. So there's some interesting things.
For release in another year.
Well. Yeah. But there's some interesting specs that have been sort of leaked with that. So, for example, and again, as a video person, I'll give you those specs and you tell me what you think of that. So, first of all, it's supposed to be able to record in 422 10-bit 4K at 60 frames per second.
Okay.
It's a 10-bit 4K at 120 frames per second. And it's also apparently sporting a new sensor which allows you to record 10-bit 5.7K at 60p.
At 60 as well?
Yeah.
Really?
So 10-bit 5.7K at 60.
Okay.
Those are the specs.
Okay.
So that seems pretty decent, man.
Yeah.
And by the way, on the 422 10-bit 4K at 60 frames per second side of things, that's without any limitations. There's no recording limit.
No, they've never had that, which is good.
So I think they just put that in there just to have a little dig at Canon,
just to remind them. Yeah.
But anyway, so that's that seems like a decent camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you've switched from a GH5S, which had a Micro Four Thirds sensor, to the Canon system, which is a full frame sensor. Well, actually. Well, it kind of is, but the C70 is...
C70 is the Super 35, which is... You just think of it like a cropped sensor,
right?
Really.
So what's your experience like moving from a Micro Four Thirds to that?
So my experiences specifically with the GH5S, which had better low light performance than the GH5 anyway. Mm-hmm. The moving to the C70 and the R6, yes, they cost significantly more. So you'd expect the performance to be better. Mm-hmm. But the low light performance on those is far, far superior than the GH5S.
Right. Okay.
Far superior. The dynamic range, I don't actually know the numbers off the top of my head, but based on the performance that I recall seeing, the dynamic range on both of those is great, much greater than the GH5S. That may be factually incorrect, because I don't know the numbers, but just from results,
right,
it's just so much better. However, when you got the light right and you weren't pushing it too hard at the low end, actually the picture was great.
Yeah,
the picture was great. The colors were really nice.
We certainly got some really good results with
that. Yeah. The C70, You would choose that picture all day long over the GH5S. You just would.
Is that because of the sort of Canon color rendering, or
partly? It's the difference. It's the difference between that being a cinema camera and shooting on something that's not a cinema camera.
Right.
It just has. It's not just the colors. There's more to it than that, and it's very difficult to describe what I mean. It has a very very different look to it than let's just say a similar specs. So this is why it's going to be interesting to see what the R5, what they call it, C, is that what it is?
Yeah.
R5C,
R5 Cinema.
How that's going to pan out and what that's going to look like. What technology they're going to use from the cinema line versus the technology they're using from the R5 itself. So
I would hazard a guess that I would say that it's going to be closer to the R6 than to the C70. That's my sort of gut feeling, because I think the R5 in general, because all this is basically it's the same specs as the R5. That's just souped up with a ventilation system basically, and different menu options and stuff like that to make it more cinema-like, basically. But I would think that as far as the engine behind the color rendering and the sensor and everything else, I think that would probably be closer to the closer to the R6 than because the C7 is a completely different sensor. That's
and
totally
it's just, I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that thing. I absolutely love it. The more and more I use it, the more I love it. I mean, the R6 is interesting with video, and I've not really had my hands on an R5 to play around with the video to see how it actually performs. But the R5 video is great in the right conditions, and when you use it right. And I know that sounds, well, of course, but you're not always in the right conditions. But when it goes outside of its comfort zone, it doesn't perform all that great. It's okay. And that might be partly that I've been spoiled with the C70. Yeah. But if that's what you're looking to match, I can never, you put those pictures side by side in the same lighting conditions where it's good light, decent light. It's low light but decent. And you put the pictures side by side. You'd think that the R6, you'd think you'd have one shot on the C70 and another shot on a potato. That's the,
right.
That's the difference when you see them side by side. That being said, if you just saw the R6 footage on its own in that situation, it looks great.
Well, we match these cameras a lot because literally, I think virtually almost everything that we shoot is a combination between both of those cameras. Probably in the past more so because I recently changed gimbal, but the old Ronin S didn't really work very well with the C70. So
it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
You couldn't,
So as a consequence, whenever we did any gimbal shots or something, they were really always done on the R6. And then for anything else, you'd use the C70. That I take it is probably going to change in the future because now you're set up with a gimbal that fits the C70.
I will. Now the C70 fits on a gimbal that I've got. I mean, the gimbal shots that have come out of that shoot we did last week or week before, whenever it was now. I haven't used it since, but those shots, they're outstanding.
I mean,
they're great shots. And had I done them on the R6.
What I've always found is that when I've seen the end results, I've always thought that that you managed to match both of these cameras extraordinarily well. Because I was always thinking
it's really hard sometimes.
I bet it is. But the end results actually always been really good. And when I've watched the final edit, I always try to think like, okay, which one of this was the R6 and what was what? And the gimbal always gives it away basically. But yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And that actually now, what the R6 now has, it's got C-Log. It's always had C-Log on it, and then the Canon's got the C70's got C-Log, C-Log 2, and C-Log 3 in there. They've got different curves and different ways that the dynamic range works in different ISOs. That's the R6 has always had C-Log, which is fine. Now it's got C-Log 3 as well. I just need it to introduce C-Log 2, which it may not be technically be able to do, which is why it's not in there yet. But I have introduced the cinema gamut in there as the color, which the C70 has. That's going to help. Now I use the C70 on production camera mode rather than neutral mode or anything like that. But on jobs where I know I'm using both, I'm going to set them both to neutral.
Right.
So they're both on the same. And yes, one's in C-Log 2 and one's in C-Log 1 or C-Log 3. Okay, that's one thing. But at least the color science behind it is going to be the same rather than slightly different. But that's cool. Otherwise, I use the production camera. Right. They all look just slightly different.
Cool.
There you go.
So there you go.
Fun times.
So coming back to the Micro Four Thirds Brigade, again, Panasonic GH6 ready to be announced on February the 22nd. But Digital, formerly known as the company formerly known as Olympus, are also about to announce a new camera. Apparently, February 15th is going to launch the whole thing with a live online event. But here's the thing. We know nothing about this camera whatsoever. The one thing that seems to be certain is that they're launching a completely new camera body. That is all we know.
Okay.
So February the 15th, a live online event on all of the known Olympus channels. So check them out on Facebook, for example, and on YouTube. I'm pretty sure, and their website, of course. I'm pretty sure you find it there. If you are an Olympus shooter, that should be really interesting. I actually know quite a few people who shoot Olympus.
Really?
Yeah, in the camera club world. Yeah, absolutely. And they're cool. They're really quite sort of vintage looking almost. They've got this kind of look. They're small. They're relatively lightweight. Micro Four Thirds. The lenses are lightweight. Makes a big difference. And I know quite a lot of people who really like them a lot.
The R6, the GH6 or GH6.
Yeah.
Is that going to be stills as well, or are they moving that to video only? I'm guessing it's stills as well.
I'm guessing it's stills as well. I haven't read anything to the contrary, but
because the stills in the GH5S were shocking.
Well, yeah, they weren't great.
Shocking.
Yeah,
they did a job and they would do something and they're all right. But to be brutally honest with you, may as well use your phone.
Panasonic. I mean, the GH6 is going to be a video-centric camera. So if you don't shoot video, then what's the point? It will be able to shoot stills. I'm pretty sure of it. But to be honest with you, if you are in the Micro Four Third environment, you're probably better off getting something like an Olympus.
Yeah.
If that's your thing, because again, it's the same mount. You can interchange lenses. Mm-hmm. That's practical. But
I tell you, well, that's one thing that's worth saying about the Panasonic lenses. The Panasonic lenses are great.
Yeah, they're really, cool.
Really good.
Yeah, they're very cool.
I love those lenses that I had.
And they're really cute and tiny.
Yeah, they are.
So light. That's the thing. Like when you were shooting the GH5, I was always a little bit jealous of the fact that you had like a whole bunch of lenses in your case, and like they weigh nothing. And as me dragging my 70-200, 24-70 is like breaking my back. That was the thing. But so interesting news anyway in that segment. If that's the thing that floats your boat, then you can look forward to some awesome announcements. Coming up in the next few weeks. Cool, so that should be good.
Good.
The only other thing I want to talk about actually is something I read again a couple of days ago that really actually sort of touched me personally. So there's something called...
I hope you reported him.
There's something called photoreminiscence therapy, or PRT. There's been a number of studies that have basically found that photoreminiscence therapy can help dementia patients.
All right.
And it really helps by overall improving the quality of life and the cognitive performance. And what that really is that you help patients by showing them photographs, maybe old family photographs or holiday photographs or something like that, and you jog their memories, and you basically use photographs to get them involved and remember those activities and those times and whatever else. And that overall has been found to have a really positive impact on dementia patients. And the reason why that's touched me quite a lot is because my own dad actually passed away from dementia, and so that's a really really interesting little bit of news I read there. It's known, like music, for instance, has been known to have the same effect.
Well, I've heard that before, and I just kind of assumed, wrongly, obviously, I kind of assumed that people would do that anyway.
I think they would, but this study now
they've actually done a proper study and got some actual data behind it. Yeah.
So it's it's really quite interesting. And I remember my dad was a drummer, and I remember his ability. He lost his ability to speak relatively early on, but he could drum almost to the very end. And that was interesting. I mean, he could play all the songs that he'd been playing for like 40 years or whatever. Beatles songs, for example, Stones, all that kind of stuff. The Trogs, all of that, stuff that he'd been playing for decades. He could play them absolutely all the way through. Whenever, what didn't really work was introducing anything new, but he could still like sit down and have a jam, and even at a point when, of course, complicated drum fills or something wouldn't work or whatever, but he could hold a groove, and you could see he was having fun, although he couldn't really communicate it because he hadn't really, he'd lost his ability to communicate verbally at that point. But I was like, that was always I always found that really fascinating.
It's funny how the things that they can retain and things that they don't retain baffles you. It's I get it's different for every person as well.
It is absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the most amazing things. Really, is the fact that everybody's affected differently, depending on which part of the brain is affected, sort of thing. And but anyway, so that was a little bit of news, a little bit of positive news there.
Yeah,
Where photography, therapy, medicine, it's just a good thing. It's just if you're not into photography, you should get into it, and B, what are you doing listening to this podcast? I mean,
well, there is that.
It's like, why?
And if you're not currently wearing double denim, don't.
Well, see, on the double denim front,
no, there's no front.
I was proven right the other day, wasn't I?
No.
Yes.
They were misguided kids.
Just to give you some context, Nick and me were judging a Battle of the Bands audition the other day, which was actually excellent. But
actually, it was, to be fair.
Yeah, it was great. It was one band, and they were awesome. And they rocked. Two of the members rocked double denim. I could not see past that.
They were young. I won't hold it against them. But
I think they must have been listening to this podcast, and they probably thought like, "Oh, maybe we could score some extra points if we play to the judges' preferences."
Do you know, it was quite funny actually, because there was one of the performers were, as soon as I arrived, or I'd come out to go and grab some more gear or something like that. It was super helpful in holding the door open and all of that kind of stuff. Came in, gave me cables and stuff,
right?
Just to buy a little bit of favour.
Oh, well, there you go.
Great,
excellent.
Yeah, he's going through.
That band is through. Double denim through.
Oh,
cool. Well, and
on that double denim disappointment.
Well, on that bombshell. That is it for this week's Camera Shake podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, let us know that you've enjoyed it. Again, leave a comment. We've had some really, really cool comments this week. You can leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Of course, leave a comment in the comments. Because where else would you leave a comment? Really? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell and all that kind of jazz. If you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, then again, please give us a star rating. Leave a little review. That would help us massively. But yeah, that's it. Episode 94, coming at you through the ear holes and the eye holes.
God.
See you next week.